NASA and the perfect astronaut.
Playing God to this extent could create an entirely new strain of humans.
A message from deep space.
The signals stand out as distinctly artificial. It repeats over and over.
And American intelligence, the mysterious alien craft, and Russian soldiers turned to stone.
Why would the CIA be involved if there wasn't something there?
These are NASA's unexplained files. The average life expectancy of a human on Earth is 80 years. The average life expectancy of a human in space is 15 seconds. Without the protection of a multi-million-dollar spacesuit, your skin, mouth, and eyes literally boil, and your lungs explode.
The human body isn't built for space, but what if we could change it?
What if we could create the perfect astronaut?
NASA, from its inception, hasn't just looked to improve its spaceships. It's looked at improving its spacemen and women. The effect of zero gravity and cosmic radiation particles batter human bodies, even when they're in the relative safety of the craft. Dr. Toby Friedman was North American Aviation's medical director working on the American Manned Spaceflight Program. He proposed a genetically modified astronaut, which he called an Optiman, able to withstand the hammer blows of space.
You would find people who had the best eyesight, who had the most strength, who could live and breathe and function well at high altitudes. Then you would take these people and selectively breed until you came out with the Optiman that had all these wonderful abilities.
Friedman wanted an astronaut breeding program, like a horse trainer trying to create a Derby winner. Since the Mercury program, NASA has been selecting astronauts according to desired physical and mental characteristics. But even super fit astronauts struggle to withstand the punishment of space travel. After 340 days on the ISS, the body of Top Gun Navy pilot Scott Kelly showed the strain.
You have a mild form of osteoporosis after being in outer space.
Your muscles atrophy, your bone density decreases, you get various sicknesses that you're not used to having, you could even go blind.
So far, NASA's most robust space travelers are robots. But we are still very far from working out how to build a robot with anything like the extraordinary originality, intuition, subtle intelligence, imagination, and adaptability of a human. One pair of scientists, Manfred Clynes and Nathan Klein, believe they have the solution. A merger of man and machine.
The scientists Clynes and Klein wrote a paper about augmenting the human body with cybernetics, and they called this person a cyborg.
A man turned into a cyborg wouldn't just be able to survive a long journey on a spaceship. He'd be able to explore unaided on alien planets and even survive in space.
They proposed sealing the mouth and nose shut of the astronaut, collapsing their lungs to prevent decompression, and then feeding the body with oxygen and nutrients using synthetic organs.
The idea was to walk around in space without having to have a spacesuit.
Half man, half robot, this cyborg astronaut would overcome the problems even the fittest human could not survive in space.
It's a really interesting thought to think about. A type of human and mechanical being all at once. Replacing eyes with mechanical eyes. Replacing bones with a different type of material so you don't have to worry about the bone density loss.
The idea is not only possible, but it's already in works. We see this with robotic implants of prosthetic limbs. It's phenomenal, the degree of advances that are being made. And NASA is leading in this.
But there are practical problems using, maintaining, and replacing machine parts when you are thousands or millions of miles from factories or workshops. If the machine part of you stops working, you could be left alive but broken down, unable to move, and condemned to a slow and excruciating death.
I've always wanted to be an astronaut, but not like that.
This cell,
As well as combine man and machine, leading biochemist Craig Venter raises the possibility of blending humans with other creatures. Could NASA embrace genetic engineering, creating a new breed of space humans?
Venter came up with the idea that we should alter our DNA to give us the traits that we don't naturally have, such that we become resilient to space travel.
Venter is leading a field where scientists splice DNA, producing incredible results. They've created glow-in-the-dark cats, neon fish, and goats that produce spider silk. Venter wants NASA to engineer astronauts with genes from other organisms, creating human hybrids.
We can enhance ourselves to live and thrive in outer space so that cell repair mechanisms are accelerated.
The modified astronaut could have genes to promote bone genesis, protect him naturally against radiation.
we could also change the very form of our body. In outer space, legs and feet have very little use. What if you could replace your toes with fingers? Now you've got 2 more hands to be able to grip tools with.
Playing God to this extent could create an entirely new strain of humans, and that's creepy.
Tampering with the human genome is currently banned in the United States, but China is less squeamish. In 2018, a team of scientists announced they had successfully delivered a designer baby.
Now, if you just create something from an embryo and you're working on a superhuman race that way, then you're getting into the supervillain territory.
China is now leading a charge into space, and morality itself may prevent America from competing in a race to create space-traveling superhumans.
China presents the greatest threat against the United States. I believe NASA is falling behind. I believe that's given China the opportunity to jump way in front of us, really.
It has the potential to get to the point that it almost might create a separate species of humanity.
January 2017, CIA headquarters, Langley, Virginia. A file is declassified, detailing a chilling 250-page KGB report obtained by U.S. intelligence. The file describes a battle deep in the wastelands of Siberia. But if the Russian story is to be believed, this was no ordinary clash of arms.
It says there were soldiers on maneuvers in Siberia, and they encountered a unidentified flying object, a UFO.
As the story goes, the soldiers shoot it down with surface-to-air missile, and it crashes.
And then out of that wreckage came some aliens.
They merge and form a glowing ball.
Then it grows bigger and explodes with a fantastic flash. In that instant, 23 soldiers are turned to stone poles.
They petrified them.
The whole thing was supposedly witnessed by a couple of soldiers who were hiding behind trees and were thus unaffected by the death rays.
Certainly something that could transmute living flesh into stone that quickly is beyond our experience.
According to the top-secret report, the petrified soldiers, as well as the wreckage of the craft that they shot down, were taken to a secret laboratory outside Moscow. Russian scientists determined they had been turned into a substance like limestone. If true, could the Kremlin now possess otherworldly weapon technology?
The Russians would have laid claim to that wreckage and would have reversed engineered the weapon system.
But some analysts say there may be another explanation.
It's highly unlikely that the Russians have discovered some kind of alien technology or materials.
You don't know if this is a cover story for some kind of weapon that the KGB might have been testing on their own soldiers.
The KGB does have a history of either covering up certain events or perhaps misdirection, or perhaps maybe exaggerate and change the facts of a story to keep the real events from actually being learned outside.
Whatever the KGB is up to, the CIA cannot ignore reports of such a strange and terrifying weapon.
What kind of weapon are they developing, and what is it intended to do?
The most terrifying thing about a petrification weapon is we don't know how they'd be doing it. If we're going to ask the question, can you turn a living being instantly into stone? I think it helps to go back and look at how the petrification that we know about functions.
Fossilization is the most widely known process that turns organic matter into stone, but is seemingly hard to weaponize as the transformation is incredibly slow.
The natural process that we see occurs over millions of years. This is not a fast process at all. But the report involves the transmutation happening almost instantaneously. Are there things that we could do, though, to speed up the petrification process and make it happen on a more human timescale instead of millions of years?
A clue might lie in a mysterious place hidden in England's rolling hills. A place said to be cursed by the devil.
If you want to see something turn to stone before your very eyes, there's a place in northern England called the Petrifying Well.
For centuries, locals lived with the fear that touching the well's water would turn them to stone.
If you put an object into the flowing water over the course of a month or two, the stone will deposit, almost like something out of The Lord of the Rings.
The beguiling process is completely indiscriminate, petrifying dead animals, a bicycle, and even John Wayne's hat.
It does make you wonder, could you stand under the waterfall long enough to become encrusted with stone?
Although the process is quicker than fossilization, it doesn't match what is said to have happened to the soldiers in Siberia.
These objects have been coated in stone. The interior is still the same. So it's just an incrustation. Those soldiers were completely stone inside and out.
Scientists in Washington State have made a breakthrough in the bizarre science of petrification that could hold the answer.
The scientists took a cube of wood, soaked it in acid for 2 days, and then they put it into a silica solution for another 2 days, and then baked it at 1400 degrees Celsius, and voila.
Rather than burning, the wood reacts with the acid and silicon, transforming into the extremely hard ceramic silicon carbide. The entire process takes just 5 days, a massive ramping up of the fossilization process.
It's still not fast enough to explain what went on with the reported soldiers being turned to stone.
Can that process be sped up so they could happen in a couple of seconds or instantaneously?
But the ceramic silicon carbide looks nothing like the limestone-like substance described in the report. A scientific discovery made in Japan in 2019 suggests it could be some exotic biological weapon. A new virus was found living in a hot spring. Acanthamoeba castellani. But it's been nicknamed the Medusa virus because of its similarities to the famous Greek mythological monster with snakes for hair and a deadly gaze.
Anybody who saw her face and the snakes were, well, they turned to stone.
Just like in the myth, when the Medusa virus comes in contact with its victims, it leaves them encased in a stone-like shell.
What's left behind is sort of a stone image of the living creature.
The Medusa virus discovered in Japan so far seems only to affect amoeba. But is it possible an advanced technology could weaponize a virus like this and amplify it to petrify humans, as described in the recently declassified report.
Really reminiscent of what we hear in old myths and legends. The techniques aren't sufficient to turn living human beings into stone instantaneously like that. If something like that happened, it is using a process that we know nothing about.
Analysts try to uncover the truth about a recently declassified KGB report of alien creatures using a mysterious weapon to turn Russian soldiers into stone.
Is it possible that the KGB, now the FSB, the Russian Intel Service, could engage in disinformation campaigns or propaganda? Absolutely. That's 100%.
It's quite likely that they're experimenting with new and potentially strange technologies and trying to make weapons out of them.
The bright flash detailed in the report appears to match the explosive signature of the world's most powerful weapons. Weapons the Russians test in remote locations like Siberia.
Maybe there was something that went off that was so intense in heat, it vaporized all the water in those soldiers, turning them to stone.
A nuclear explosion, if you're close enough, will flash incinerate you.
Some suggest that what really happened in Siberia was a nuclear accident. Historical records reveal it would not be the first.
There were reports soldiers being killed as a result of nuclear tests in remote regions where there was nobody to witness that. Thousands of troops were exposed to radiation during nuclear tests.
James Oberg has investigated Russian military technology cover-ups for over 20 years. He finds the Kremlin often uses accounts of aliens as cover stories.
From my own studies, many of the famous UFO stories from Russia in the 60s were directly caused by tests of Russian weapons.
March 1967. Thousands of Soviet citizens from Ukraine to the Caucasus report seeing strange crescent-shaped lights in the sky. Similar sightings continue through the spring of 1968 and are reported in newspapers and on television across the Soviet Union. But in fact, this was an illegal space-to-ground nuclear weapon system being tested by the Soviets.
The weapons are designed for a surprise first strike attack on the U.S. Some of them occurred at twilight with the sky dark, but with the rocket plume illuminated. People on the ground saw astonishing-looking shapes in the sky that they reported as flying saucers. Some of those famous ones are still online on the internet as genuine UFOs certified by the Russian Academy of Sciences.
But something doesn't make sense. If the KGB report about aliens in an alien craft was meant to throw people off the scent, why was the report not made public? The description of these aliens and of the incident in which Russian soldiers were turned into stone, all of this was in a top-secret report. It cannot be dismissed as a mere cover story.
The Russian media never reported openly. On this level, the government definitely suppressed these reports.
Russia today remains as secretive as ever. The truth of what happened in the Siberian wilderness may never be fully revealed. There remains the possibility that Russia, which is still a military superpower, possesses a secret weapon that can turn men into stone, whether developed by its own scientists or stumbled upon from elsewhere.
We could be looking at some kind of new warfare.
January 2019. China makes history. For the first time, a rover lands on the far side of the moon. A triumph for Chinese space science. Or is it achieved with stolen American space science? China, it seems, has spies everywhere.
They have agents in every major city, around every military base, They have agents around every NASA facility.
In just 16 years since its first astronaut went into orbit, China has raced ahead of America and Russia, who used to be the only two players in the game.
China is really aggressively expanding its foothold in space.
One of the things you do when you have global ambitions, which the Chinese do, is the conquest of space.
We'd been caught blindsided, really sort of caught with our pants down.
When you see an advancement this rapid, you really start to take a look at how they did it, and you start to get concerned.
China hasn't made giant leaps into space by playing by the rules. It's been stealing from its rivals, and the US space program is a prime target. And they even suspect there's a spy inside the space program itself.
The United States needs to find that security hole and plug it.
The FBI starts to look for leads and possible suspects.
They find the name of a Chinese-born American, Dongfang Chung, who's assumed the American name Greg.
He works for one of NASA's biggest contractors.
He was a structural engineer for Rockwell and a structural engineer for Boeing, and what do both companies do? They build and maintain the shuttle fleet.
Chung helped design the crew cabin of the doomed space shuttle Columbia and tests the fuselages of spacecraft. Important work, but doesn't make you a millionaire. Yet Chung has a large amount of money at his disposal.
He's making about $60,000 a year, yet he has purchased multiple businesses, land, he has built a house on the land, paid for it with cash. It doesn't add up for how much he's making.
The FBI begins to monitor Chung's movements. Chung leaves his house carrying what will turn out to be diplomatic pouches. He drives 400 miles to San Francisco and pays a visit to the Chinese consulate.
That is not normal behavior for a structural engineer. What is Chung carrying in those diplomatic pouches?
In the dead of night, agents look through his trash cans.
What they discover, slipped in between pages of Chinese language newspapers, are highly sensitive technological documents from Rockwell and Boeing.
The documents have got some letters like OV and STS. Well, that stands for Orbiting Vehicle and Space Transportation System. It's shuttle technology.
The spy hunters make their move. They confront Chung. The Chinese engineer flatly denies that he is passing space secrets to the Chinese.
The FBI knows that they have to crack this guy.
The investigators have evidence. A letter addressed to Chung from a top aviation official in China.
It actually says that the Chinese government plans to build an Earth-orbiting space station, and they want Chung to gather any relevant technological information.
But this is America. According to the letter of the law, the feds need irrefutable evidence that Chung has passed on secrets, and they can't raid embassies or start searching diplomatic bags.
While the letter asks Chung to steal secrets, the FBI still needs to find proof that he's actually done it.
FBI agents search the home of suspected Chinese spy Greg Chung, but they find nothing. The house has been scrubbed clean, and there are no technical documents relating to space science.
They're not finding anything really inside the house, but then they discover something under the house.
One of the agents finds a hidden door under the deck at the back of the house. It leads to a secret room under the building. What they find inside changes everything.
There's floor-to-ceiling shelves in this room just filled with documents.
He had over 250,000 documents sitting in a crawl space underneath his home. This was a massive dump of material.
The hoard of material contains details on some of America's most classified technology, including the Delta IV booster rocket used for launching men into space. A massive boon for China's ambitions to reach the stars.
It covered everything from space shuttle systems to rocket technology, military hardware. By the time he was wrapped up, he had been doing this for over 30 years.
FBI agents finally arrest Chung, and he is brought to trial. It's discovered he had amassed over $3 million from the Chinese government.
Chung is the first American citizen to be convicted under the Economic Espionage Act, and this is a major success for the FBI.
Chung gets 15 years in jail, but the extent of his treachery may have put China ahead in the space race.
It was a bit of a hollow victory because he had already done the damage. The Chinese had already benefited from all of that effort.
China appears poised to achieve some kind of milestone in space before the US does. It would kind of be like a Sputnik moment relived.
August 2017. Tech billionaire Yuri Milner spends $100 million of his fortune searching for alien signals in space. Today, he strikes gold. His Breakthrough Listen project detects 15 strange signals coming from the Auriga star system.
It's basically like a beacon of radio energy, rippling outwards across the universe, kind of like a stone makes ripples in a pond.
The signals stand out as distinctly artificial. It repeats over and over. And that's exactly the sort of thing that we would look for in a signal from ET.
Now scientists face a massive challenge.
If this is a message, what does it mean? And how can we possibly decipher an alien code?
Science fiction makes it look easy.
We're from Mars. Don't be afraid.
On TV, you know, the aliens always speak idiomatic English. I'm usually better than the English spoken by my relatives, right? But in reality, that's not likely to be the case. They're not going to speak English.
Whatever message may be hidden in the mysterious radio signal will be much harder to decipher than any human language.
We have to be prepared when we intercept alien languages, not just an alien version of English, but a totally different dimension of sound, sights, smells, colors that aliens may use.
NASA has poured millions into researching the ways animals receive and relay information, as a first step towards trying to understand how aliens might communicate.
Even on the planet Earth, animals communicate in a much different way than we communicate. Take a bat, for example. If you could somehow breed a bat that becomes intelligent, they would talk to you with sonar. If you were to talk to a race of birds, they would communicate with melodies. Or take a dog. Dogs think in terms of smells. Thousands of smells drifting in and out of their consciousness. That's how they would communicate.
The space agency's largest investment has been in an attempt to communicate with dolphins, the nearest thing we have on Earth to intelligent aliens.
They aren't terrestrial. They don't live on the land. These are aquatic creatures, but they're incredibly intelligent.
3 dolphins, including a particularly clever one called Peter, are brought to a specially built submerged laboratory in the Caribbean.
Perhaps someday we'll understand what they're saying.
There was such a feeling of optimism that the scientists dubbed themselves the Order of the Dolphin.
They believe that dolphins could one day take a seat in the UN and represent their entire species to the world and even make a contribution to world affairs.
23-year-old Margaret Howe volunteered to join the team. She was particularly interested in the young male dolphin called Peter.
She goes as far as to start living in the tank 24/7 with her desk suspended from the ceiling so that she can keep her papers dry.
One of Margaret's own goals was to get Peter to say, "Margaret."
She just goes through this every single day. Hello, Margaret. Hello, Margaret. Trying to get Peter to repeat after her.
But after 3 years of hard work, it all comes to nothing.
By putting his mouth halfway out of the water, Peter did learn to say something that sounded like, hello, Margaret. Whether Peter really knew what that meant or not, we don't know.
The team run up against a fundamental problem of cross-species communication, which makes cracking newly received alien code seem almost impossible.
They're never going to be able to speak good English or any other language. That's just not part of their brain structure.
If in the end we can't speak with dolphins, who are biologically very similar, what's the chance we're going to be able to speak with aliens from a different civilization?
Some scientists hope there might be a way to crack what seems to be a coded signal from another star system.
Mathematics and physics is the universal language of the universe.
The engineers who build the radio telescopes on other planets need to know some basic math and physics. That's what we use as our universal language.
It's very easy to explain math to another culture if they know math themselves. While they might not use the line up and down for 1 and a circle for a 0, they use some symbol for a 1 and a 0, or on and off.
But as some scientists work out a possible way to decode the signal from Auriga, others urge them to stop.
Whatever's making that signal's got to be very, very powerful.
In 2018, astrophysicist John Learned releases a paper warning that signals potentially sent by an alien civilization, like the one picked up by Breakthrough Listen, could be an attack rather than a greeting.
Is this a civilization that wants to just reach out and find out if we exist? Do they want something that we have?
It's possible that an advanced civilization created these radio beacons to say, hey, look here, this is a signal that we left.
Or is this signal more like bait, waiting for a response? They know how to find us.
Bait is a tactic used by predators across the animal kingdom.
The anglerfish is a grotesque-looking, bulbous fish that has these amazing teeth, but it also has a bioluminescent beacon. So it flips up like this, and it acts like bait.
Any creature curious enough to investigate closer is devoured by the anglerfish's powerful jaws. Perhaps the alien signal works in the same way.
If they are much more advanced than us, then watch out. We may be insects to them, or for that matter, we may be lunch to them. Who knows?
It might even be dangerous to open it because it could be some sort of super weapon.
A highly intelligent, superior civilization could send us a message, and in that message it could be a very intelligent virus that could morph and take over everything that there is on Earth.
Learned warns an alien signal could shut down our computers, bringing our technological society to an end. Or worse, it could even hijack our laboratories and factories to start the construction of an alien civilization on Earth.
It could be some kind of downloadable program that would open up and then tell other things to start replicating. That would seem like the most sensible way to me to spread your species.
The Breakthrough Listen signal remains unexplained and undeciphered. Many believe that's the way it should be left.
If we do receive and decode an alien message, it could be our undoing. It's a terrifying prospect, and we won't know until it's too late.
A horse-drawn caisson bears the body of Lieutenant Colonel Virgil Gus Grissom, one of 3 Apollo astronauts killed in a tragic flash fire at Cape Kennedy.
America is united in a state of shock and mourning. NASA has never experienced a tragedy like this. In 1967, 3 of its most senior astronauts are killed in a terrifying way. But half a century later, the circumstances of their death remains a matter of dispute and controversy. January 27, 1967, Cape Kennedy, Florida. NASA's new Apollo 1 command module stands atop the Saturn 1B rocket that will take it into orbit.
Apollo 1 is the most complicated piece of space equipment that has been built at the time.
This was the flight that was going to prove the new, large, 3-person spacecraft was up to the task of going to the moon.
This mission is one of the most important space flights to date.
NASA selects a highly decorated crew for the prestigious mission. Command pilot Gus Grissom, senior pilot Ed White, and pilot Roger Chaffee.
They needed to make sure that this first Apollo mission would be by the best astronauts that they had.
But Commander Gus Grissom has doubts about the program.
I think Gus had a very accurate feel that that capsule had a lot to be worked on. It was frustrating for him.
Gus Grissom is a decorated war hero, flying fighter planes in Korea. At 40 years old, he's risen through the astronaut corps, becoming the second American in space, and he's destined for even greater things.
That's one small step for man.
If Apollo 1 had been a success, we might be remembering the name Gus Grissom, not Neil Armstrong.
Giant leap for mankind.
A month before the scheduled launch, the crew buckle in for a full system check.
They were inside the cabin and hatch was closed. Everything was isolated.
As the cabin is pressurized with pure oxygen to simulate mission conditions,
The cabin was full of flammable material.
And their suits are starting to catch on fire.
Man leader, get in there and help them.
Pure oxygen. Even things like skin will burst into fire.
Man leader, CFC3.
the 3 astronauts fight frantically to open the capsule's hatch as fire crews reach the craft, which is now pouring with smoke. But the hatch refuses to open.
In a matter of seconds, the pressure in the capsule built was so much there was no way you could pull that hatch in against that pressure. You couldn't have done it with a wrecker.
By the time the escape hatch had been opened, they were charred, they were dead.
Can you imagine being on the crew at the pad, having to bring out those bodies? That just had to be one of the most traumatic emotional experiences a person could have.
January 1967. NASA has never before lost an astronaut while on a mission. Suddenly, in the most horrific circumstances, it loses 3 of its best. It leads some to suspect that America's space program has been targeted by the Soviets. The Soviets are ramping up pressure on NASA, planning their first moon landing in 2 years, and they will try anything to win the race.
Anytime there's a fatal accident involving an astronaut, there has to be the presumption that this could be a crime scene. A motivation certainly could be that the Russians, competing with the Americans, did not want them to get a leg up.
There was a Russian ship off Cape Canaveral during that launch, listening to us, watching us, seeing what we're doing.
But one man believes the culprits behind the fire are much closer to home and is determined to expose what he sees as the truth.
Thomas Barron was a quality control engineer who filed a 500-page report criticizing the project.
Barron claims to have seen firsthand manufacturing problems that he says make Apollo a death trap.
Before filing his report, Barron told NASA that there were irregularities and improper actions at the launch pad.
And after this, Barron claims a sinister campaign of intimidation begins.
Barron claimed to have been visited by a man in black who harassed him.
In Washington, astronauts Borman, McDivitt, Slayton, Schirra, and Shepard attend a congressional subcommittee hearing probing the Apollo capsule disaster.
Despite the apparent intimidation, Barron gives critical testimony in front of the committee investigating the fire.
A lot of things that he had personally witnessed in the design of the spacecraft, in checking out the spacecraft, that he thought was a disaster waiting to happen.
A number of studies found that a lot of his concerns were legitimate.
But his report doesn't just address technical issues.
He was focusing on morale questions and dissatisfaction with the specific employees.
You've always got the potential possibility of some disgruntled employee sabotaging something.
Don't know from the standpoint of every bit of detail that he wrote in there, whether it was 100% accurate or not, but it was accurate enough that we had to look at it and we had to answer all his questions.
But the official response to the report is dismissive.
I say, yes, but we're working those, we're fixing these, fixing that.
For his efforts, Barron is fired from his job as engineering inspector.
In my opinion, shot him down.
And 6 days later, Barron is dead.
He and his wife and 2 kids were killed at a train crossing in Titusville.
State troopers say it's an accident, that he tried to cross in his car just as a train was coming. But many felt Barron's death so soon after he gave testimony was suspicious.
Some would question, is this a pattern that points toward conspiracy to silence the critics of the space program?
After 3 months of thorough investigation, NASA determines Apollo 1 was not sabotaged, but was destroyed by a series of accidental factors.
They never could say conclusively where or what ignited the fire within the capsule.
Former committee experts praise Barron's tenacity in filing his report, but deny any conspiracy to hide the truth.
Sabotage was never considered to be a viable inspection point.
Barron's death may have been an accident, or maybe not. Whatever the truth, NASA engineers rose to the challenge, completing the mission of the 3 astronauts who died on the launch pad that day, when 2 years later, Apollo 11 successfully landed on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
When Armstrong finally landed on the moon, he placed an Apollo 1 patch there in memory of those who lost their lives, and it's still there today.